My stepfather was on the phone when I walked through the back door. He didn't hear me come in. The kitchen still smelled like the coffee he'd made that morning, and he was standing with his back to me, one hand pressed flat against the counter, voice low. "She signs Tuesday," he said. "After that, it doesn't matter." I stopped. My bag was still on my shoulder. My keys were still in my hand. "It doesn't matter," he said again, "because she won't be contesting anything." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I stood in the doorway of the kitchen I'd grown up in, the kitchen my father built with his own hands before he got sick, and I listened to my stepfather tell someone on the phone that after I signed my father's estate over to the family trust on Tuesday, I wouldn't be a problem anymore. Before I tell you what happened at that signing, drop a comment below. I want to know, what is one moment you almost trusted someone you should have walked away from? Tell me. I'll be reading every single one. You're probably wondering why I was even at that house, why I went back, why at 31 years old, I was still walking through that back door like I was 12 and just home from school. The answer is that I had convinced myself I owed them something. My father died 18 months ago. Pancreatic cancer, the kind that moves fast and doesn't negotiate. He was gone in 4 months from diagnosis. His name was Bernard, and he was the kind of man who ironed his own shirts and remembered everybody's birthday and never in his life raised his voice at me, not even once. He left behind a house, a small investment account, and a daughter who had spent the better part of a decade believing that as long as she kept the peace, things would be okay. My stepmother's name is Joelle. She came into my father's life when I was 14, which is the worst possible age to meet someone your parent has decided to love. I wanted to hate her at first, and then I tried to like her. And then I spent the next 17 years doing something in between, tolerating her in the way you tolerate a weather pattern. You don't love it. You don't fight it. You just check the forecast before you leave the house. Her son from her first marriage moved in with us when I was 16. Devin was 2 years older than me and treated our house like a hotel he hadn't paid for. He left dishes everywhere. He borrowed my father's car without asking. He called me the extra at family dinners, usually while my stepmother laughed like it was cute. I became a pharmacist. I worked hard. I made a decent living. I rented a studio apartment 20 minutes from the house because my father asked me once, quietly, if I could stay close while he was sick, and I had said yes because that's what you say when your father asks you something like that, in a voice like that. After he died, I stayed close because I didn't know how to stop. The will left the house and the investment account, about $340,000 combined, split equally between Joelle and me. Joelle got the right to live in the house until she chose to sell. I had no claim to the property until she vacated or we agreed to sell together. The investment account was split, my half held in a trust until the estate closed. Devin had not been mentioned in the will. My father had written it before they married, updated it once after, and apparently decided that his stepdaughter-in-law and his biological daughter were enough. Joelle had not taken that well. For 18 months, the estate attorney had been sending paperwork. For 18 months, Joelle had been not quite ready, not ready to sign the inventory, not ready to finalize the account transfer, not ready, not ready, not ready. My attorney said it was stalling. I said I'd give her time because she just lost her husband, and I understood grief. What I didn't understand, what I was still learning, was that some people use grief the same way they use everything else, as a tool. 2 months before Tuesday, I went to the house to pick up a box of my father's books that Joelle had said I could have. I let myself in, with the key I'd had since high school. I was halfway up the stairs when I heard Devin's voice coming from the den. Property would go to her estate, not the trust, so she has to sign first. Then, I heard a third voice say something I couldn't make out. "Look," Devin said, "I'm not saying it has to happen there. I'm saying after Tuesday, it doesn't matter where it happens. The house flips to the trust. Her half goes into the account, and the account goes to the trust." The other voice said. "Right," Devin said. So. I stood on the stairs of my father's house and heard my stepbrother explain to someone that my death after a document signing would be a financial convenience. I didn't go up the rest of the stairs. I went back down quietly and out the back door and sat in my car for 45 minutes without starting the engine. Here's what I knew about Devin that most people didn't. He had 2 DUIs, a gambling problem he'd never fully admitted to, and a friend group that operated somewhere in the gray space between shady and actively illegal. I had known these things for years. I had filed them away the way you file away information about weather. Useful to know, unlikely to matter. Now it mattered. I called my attorney from the car. He said what attorneys say, which is that overhearing a conversation is not evidence, and that I should not, under any circumstances, accuse anyone of anything before we had something concrete. He said the Tuesday signing could be postponed. I said no. If I postponed it, they'd know I suspected something. I said I needed to think. I thought for approximately 6 hours. Then I went to an electronics store. I didn't buy anything obvious. I bought a small voice-activated recorder the size of a pack of gum and a clip-on device that looked exactly like the kind of wireless charging pad that's been sitting in every American home since 2019, the ones nobody looks at twice. I set the recorder in my bag and the charging pad on the kitchen counter the next time I stopped by, under the excuse of dropping off a casserole dish Joelle had left at my apartment months ago. "Just leave it on the counter," she said, not looking up from her phone. I did. I tested the audio from my car, crystal clear. You could hear the refrigerator hum. For 10 days, I listened. Mostly it was nothing. Joelle watching television. Joelle on the phone with her sister about things that had nothing to do with me. Devin coming and going at odd hours. Then, 5 days before Tuesday, I heard the conversation that changed everything. I was sitting in the parking lot of the pharmacy where I work, eating a sandwich at 1:30 in the afternoon, when the audio on my phone went active. Joelle was in the kitchen. She wasn't alone. "The account requires both signatures to release," she was saying. "Once she signs the estate documents, it should transfer in 3 to 5 business days." A man's voice, not Devin. "Older. Careful. And the policy? I'm the secondary beneficiary on her father's life insurance. She's primary, but if she predeceases, how much? 200,000. Silence. "There's also what's in the investment account," Joelle said. "Her half transfers to her estate if she dies intestate. She doesn't have a will." I checked. "And you're next of kin?" "I'm the only family she has." I sat in the parking lot in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon and listened to my stepmother explain to an unknown man that I didn't have a will and that she would inherit everything I owned if I died without one. She wasn't wrong. I had never made a will. I was 31 and healthy, and I had kept telling myself I'd get to it. I put the sandwich down. I picked up my phone and called my attorney. I told him I needed to see him that afternoon. I told him I was not postponing Tuesday. I told him to draw up a will, everything to a cousin in Oregon I'd been close to as a kid, and to notarize it before the weekend. "You want to tell me what's happening?" he said. "I want to tell you everything," I said, "but I want the will done first." He got it done by Friday. My estate, such as it was, now had a legal destination that was not my stepmother. That was the first thing. The second thing I did was call Devin's ex-girlfriend. Her name is Petra. She and Devin had dated for almost 2 years before she ended it abruptly, and she had sent me a text 3 weeks after the breakup that just said, "I hope you're being careful." I had thought it was strange at the time. I had not responded. I was thinking about it now. She picked up on the second ring. Petra told me, in a very measured voice, that Devin owed money to a man who had a history of resolving debts in ways that weren't entirely legal. She told me she had broken up with Devin because he had asked her to help him with something she hadn't wanted to help with. And she didn't tell me what it was. But she told me it involved a car and a parking garage and someone who was going to be there at a specific time. She told me she had left because she thought about it for 3 days and decided she didn't want to know what happened after. "Who was the someone?" I said. She was quiet. "Petra." "I don't know for certain it was you," she said. "I let that sit between us. But you had your suspicions," I said. "I looked you up after I ended things with him," she said. "I saw about your dad. I wanted to make sure you were okay. That's why I texted. Why didn't you say more?" "Because I didn't have proof," she said. "Because I wasn't sure. Because he's Devin, and I'd spent 2 years telling myself he wasn't actually that person." She paused. "I'm sorry. I should have said more." "I need you to write down everything you told me," I said. "Dates, details, anything you remember. And I need you to be willing to repeat it to someone official if it comes to that." She said she would. She said she should have done it sooner. I said I understood. Here's the thing about being the person in a family who makes everything work. You develop a very specific set of skills that everyone around you takes for granted. You learn how to stay quiet in rooms where loud people are talking. You learn how to track information without appearing to track it. You learn how to smile and nod and wait. I had spent 17 years learning those skills in that family. They had no idea what I'd built with them. Monday night, The night before the signing, I sat in my apartment and went through everything I had. 2 weeks of audio recordings. Petra's written account, emailed to me and forwarded to my attorney. The original will. My new will. Documentation of Devon's financial history, which my attorney had quietly pulled together through channels I didn't ask too many questions about. I also had a recording from 48 hours earlier that I had not yet told anyone about. 3 days before the signing, Devon had been in the kitchen. I don't know if Joel was home. He was on the phone and the audio activated. "She's coming at 2, he said. Signs, shakes hands, leaves. We're set up on the access road by the county park. It's the only way out from that side of town." A pause. "No, it's fine. It looks like a random thing. Cars have accidents on that road all the time." Another pause. "Because she always takes that road," he said. "She has for 15 years. It's a habit. People die from habits." I had listened to that recording 4 times. Each time I got to "people die from habits," I had to stop and sit very still until my hands stopped shaking. I could have gone to the police right then. I had thought about it. I had turned it over from every angle. The problem was that I worked in a small enough town that Joel and Devon would hear about it within hours of any formal report. If they knew the recordings existed, the devices would be gone. The evidence would be gone. They would lawyer up, claim misunderstanding, claim I was a paranoid grieving daughter trying to complicate an estate settlement. My attorney had warned me about exactly this scenario. He said we needed them to commit. We needed them to be on record in real time with a witness. So I did not take the county park road home that evening. I took the highway, and I drove to the police station where I had a very quiet conversation with a detective I had looked up in advance. A woman named Okafor who handled financial crimes and had a reputation for taking complicated cases seriously. I told Detective Okafor everything. I played her the recordings. I gave her Petra's statement. I showed her the notarized will. She listened without interrupting, which in my experience is the mark of someone who understands that the story matters. When I finished, she said, "What do you want to do about Tuesday?" I said I wanted to show up. She looked at me for a moment. "You understand what you're asking?" "They planned this assuming I wouldn't know," I said. "I know. That changes what's possible." She said she needed to make some calls. She said she would have people positioned at the county park access road by noon Tuesday. She said she wanted me wired. I said okay. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in my apartment and stared at the ceiling and thought about my father ironing his shirts. I thought about the way he used to make coffee. Too strong, always, and with exactly 2 sugars. And how I had inherited his coffee maker and kept it on my counter, and sometimes made it his way even though it was too strong for me, just to have the smell of it in the apartment. I thought about what he would say if he knew what his wife and her son had spent 18 months building in his house. I thought he would be heartbroken. I thought he might also say, "I'm glad you paid attention, sweetheart. I always told you to pay attention, sweetheart. I always told you to pay attention." He had. Since I was small, pay attention, sweetheart. Not to what people say, to what they do. I paid attention. The signing was at the estate attorney's office at 2 in the afternoon. The room was beige and smelled like printer paper and old carpet. Joelle arrived 3 minutes late, which was something she always did, not late enough to be rude, just late enough to make everyone else feel like they had been waiting. Devon came with her, which surprised my attorney and didn't surprise me. "He's just here for support," Joelle said, as if that were a self-evident explanation. Devon sat in the chair along the wall. He had his phone out, texting. He looked bored, which told me everything I needed to know about how confident he felt. My attorney walked through the documents, the estate inventory, the transfer of the investment account, my half releasing into my own account upon final signature, Joelle's half releasing into hers, the terms by which she continued to hold the right of residence in the house. I signed each page where I was told to sign. My hand was steady. I had made it steady through an act of will I will not underestimate, because that steadiness cost me something. Joelle signed. Her signature was large and looping, the kind of signature that takes up too much space. Devon glanced up from his phone once while she was signing. He caught my eye. He smiled. It was small and satisfied, and it turned my stomach. "Well," my attorney said, collecting the pages, "that concludes the estate settlement of Bernard Calloway. Congratulations to both parties." Joelle stood and shook his hand. She shook mine too, which required a particular kind of performance from both of us, and then she turned to gather her coat. "Drive safe," Devin said to me, standing. His voice was casual, almost friendly, the voice of a man who believed he was watching the last scene of a plan that had already succeeded. "I always do," I said. I walked out of that office, got in my car, and drove to the highway. The county park access road, the route I had taken for 15 years out of habit, was where Detective Okafor had positioned 2 unmarked vehicles and a unit in the tree line. I learned this later. At the time I was on the highway, hands at 10 and 2, driving the route I had chosen. The route I had told no one except Detective Okafor that I was taking. What I learned later, Devin had texted someone at 2:37 p.m., 3 minutes after I left the parking lot. The text said, "She's out, on her way." The response, "In position." The 2 men waiting on the county park access road were stopped at 3:08 p.m. when they attempted to leave the area in a truck registered to a man with 2 prior felony convictions. Detective Okafor's team had been watching them since 1:45. There was equipment in the truck. I was not told the specifics of the equipment, and I did not ask. Devin was picked up at 4:15, still in the parking lot of a coffee shop 3 blocks from the attorney's office. His phone had the texts. It had other texts too, going back 6 weeks, that my attorney later described as building a very complete picture. Joelle was at home when 2 officers knocked on the door at 5:30 in the afternoon. She opened it still wearing her coat. I know this because I was parked across the street. I had asked Detective Okafor if I could be there. She had said that was up to me, and that she couldn't officially sanction it, and that if I happened to be parked in a public street at that hour, she had no way of knowing. I was parked in a public street. When Joelle saw the officers, she didn't immediately understand. I watched her face go through 3 or 4 expressions in about 2 seconds. Confusion, then the beginning of a social performance. The smile she used for authority figures, and then something else, something underneath the smile, when she saw that the officers weren't smiling back. She looked past them toward the street. I don't know if she was looking for Devin, or for some explanation, or if she was just looking the way people look when the structure of their life begins to give way. For a moment, across the darkening street, she looked straight at my car. I didn't look away. I don't know if she saw me. I hope she did. The charges came down over the following weeks. Conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, financial fraud related to the misrepresentation of estate terms. The man from the phone, the one with the careful voice, turned out to be someone Joelle had known for years, a business contact of her first husband. The 2 men on the County Park Road were connected to Devin's debt. The debt itself, once unraveled, turned out to be the thing that had started all of it. Not love, not grief, not even genuine greed exactly. Desperation. The kind that makes people do the math on a human life and decide the number works out. The estate attorney, when my attorney informed him of the circumstances, turned the color of old paper. He had not known. He was apparently one of those people who had simply not been paying attention. My father's house sold 8 months later. Joel's right of residence terminated upon her incarceration, and since the property was tied up in legal proceedings anyway, the court eventually ordered the sale. I got my father's books. I got his coffee maker. I got his watch, which I wear sometimes when I need to feel like someone is paying attention. I also got my half of the investment account, which cleared into my account on a Thursday afternoon while I was on a lunch break. I sat in my car and looked at the number on my phone screen for a long time. It was the most money I had ever had in one place. My father's money. 17 years of him working and saving and believing that things should be left properly when you go. I put the phone in my pocket and went back to work. Petra testified. Her statement mattered. She has since moved to a different city, and I have sent her one card. A thank you, which I mean, completely. She wrote back, I should have sent the text sooner. I'm glad you answered. I think about that a lot. About all the moments in those years where someone could have said something more clearly and didn't, and how long a silence like that can stretch before it becomes a shape you can't see around. Devin pled out. Joelle didn't. Her trial took 11 days. I testified on day 4. I sat in that chair, and I answered every question my attorney had prepared me for, and some he hadn't. And I kept my voice level because I had spent 31 years learning how to keep my voice level in rooms where I was not the person who was supposed to matter. The jury was out for less than a day. I don't have a word for what I felt when the verdict came in. Not relief exactly. Relief implies that I had been holding something, And I think what I'd actually done was set it down somewhere along the way, in the parking lot after I heard the first phone call maybe, or in Detective Okafor's office, or on the highway the afternoon of the signing. I had set it down and kept walking. The verdict just confirmed that I had put it in the right place. I live in a different apartment now. Bigger. On the third floor, which I like for reasons that are probably obvious. My father's coffee maker is on the counter. His watch is on my wrist. His books are in a bookcase I built myself, which took 2 weekends and was harder than I expected and which I am very proud of. I still take the highway home. I changed that habit on purpose. Some habits you keep because they were good to begin with. Some you keep because you've had them so long you forgot why you started. And some you let go of because they were never really yours. They were just the shape of the path that other people had made for you, expecting you to keep walking it. I make my own path now. I check it before I use it. I've been thinking lately about what my father would make of all of it. The whole story, laid out from beginning to end. I think he'd be quiet for a long time, the way he got quiet when something was very serious. I think he'd drink his terrible coffee, and then I think he'd say, "You paid attention." I did, so tell me. If you had heard what I heard through that recording, your family, your own house, the people who are supposed to be your people, what would you have done? Would you have gone to the police immediately, or would you have shown up anyway? Because sometimes the only way to close a door for good is to walk through it one last time. Tell me in the comments. Share this if you believe that attention is the one thing no one can take from you. And if you're new here, welcome to Karma's Tangle. Things always come full circle. I'll see you in the next one. I think about cause and effect a lot these days, not in a mystical way. I'm a pharmacist. I deal in mechanisms, in what a substance does to a body and why. But I've come to believe that human behavior works the same way. Every action has a downstream consequence. Every choice compounds. Joelle and Devin didn't end up in handcuffs because of one bad decision made on one bad afternoon. They ended up there because of hundreds of small choices made over years, each one nudging them further down a road they built themselves, one dismissal and one manipulation at a time. And I was part of that equation too. Not the harmful part, but I stayed quiet longer than I should have. I kept the peace when the peace wasn't worth keeping. I told myself that tolerating things was the same as surviving them. It isn't. Tolerance without limits isn't kindness. It's just a different kind of disappearing. My father used to say that the most important thing a person could develop was a good sense of what was actually happening. Not what someone told you was happening. Not what you wished were happening. What was actually demonstrably in front of you. He called it paying attention. I called it uncomfortable. For a long time, I chose comfort over clarity, because clarity meant seeing things I didn't want to see. What changed me wasn't the recordings. It wasn't Petra's phone call, or the parking lot, or the moment I heard Devin say people die from habits. What changed me was the moment I chose to do something with what I knew instead of filing it away. Intelligence without action is just a very elaborate way of waiting for someone else to fix things. I had the information. I had to decide I was worth using it for. That's the part nobody tells you about resilience. It isn't the absence of fear. I was terrified every single day between that parking lot and the signing. I ran through every way it could go wrong, every version where I ended up worse off than I started. Resilience was showing up anyway, making the will anyway, calling Petra anyway, sitting across from Detective Okafor and saying out loud, the thing I had been afraid to say, I think my family is planning to kill me. Joelle thought my quietness was weakness. Devin thought my habits were predictable. They had both watched me for years being careful and accommodating and non-confrontational, and they drew conclusions from that. Their conclusions were wrong. Quiet is not the same as unaware. Patient is not the same as powerless. They mistook the surface of me for the whole thing, and that mistake cost them everything. I'm not glad about what happened to them. I want to be clear about that. I'm not glad Joelle is in prison, or that Devin's life is dismantled. I'm not glad any of it was necessary. I am glad I'm alive. I am glad I paid attention. I am glad that my father's money went where he meant it to go, and that his house sold to a family who will fill it with something other than what it had become. I wear his watch. I make his coffee. I built a bookcase. These are small things, but they are mine, and no one decided them for me. That's what I want to leave you with. Not a lesson, exactly, More like something I had to learn the slow way. The people who want to reduce you will always tell you that your best qualities are your worst ones. They'll call your patience stupidity, your loyalty weakness, your attention paranoia. Don't let them name you. The same qualities they counted on to keep you still were the ones that ultimately brought everything to light. What you build in the quiet, no one can take from you.